Some of them I can answer, some I can't. I try to be smart. I just try to be smart. This is the best I can do. Okay, let's head over to Israel, shall we? Because as we know, Israel is God's timepiece, and everything that happens in the day of the Lord is for Israel. It's their time getting the chosen people back to the true Messiah. So let's take a look at this. Date set for Israeli attack on Rafah. And Turkey imposes trade restrictions on Israel until ceasefire. We got a couple of interesting things here. I'm going to do my best to unpack it as a simple man that I am. It says Turkey has announced that it is imposing trade restrictions on Israel until the country declares a ceasefire in Gaza against the Hamas terrorist organization. We'll get to that in just a second. I want to talk about this first. It says Israel, Gaza. On Monday, Israeli Prime Minister Bibi said that a date has been set for an attack on Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah, despite objections from the United States of an attack on the location. Hang on to that. I just want to get through this real quick before we start unpacking this. It says this victory requires entry into Rafah and the elimination of the terrorist battalions there. Yes, it does. Go get them, boys. It will happen. There is a date. According to Israel Defense Forces, its 98th Division has been withdrawn from Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, where it has been operating for the past 4 months, in order to prepare. This is the key part. In order to prepare for an offensive on Rafah, according to Israeli media. So there's some stuff, before we get into the Turkey thing, there's some stuff out there coming in the mainstream media, as well as some of just the Middle East media, where it says, oh, Israel's withdrawing from Gaza. No, they're not. If you take a look, they have taken their forces out of the main central part where they were operating for the past 4 months, but they still have a security border around it. So what they're doing is these guys, the boys there, have been in there for months. They've had no time to rest or relax. Such a weird way of saying that word, or relax. Just chillax, everyone. But to recoup a little bit. And so what they're doing is they've got the security around the area, and then they're pulling people, getting their troops back to regroup, to rest, regroup, and get ready to go and take Rafah, which seems to be the line in the sand. There's been other lines in the sand before, so just keep that in mind. But it seems to be, this is the latest line in the sand, that if they were to go into that city, that there's going to be a lot of very angry people surrounding Israel, including Hezbollah that sits in the north, which Israel has been calling up more reservists and strengthening the defense on the north, because they are preparing for an attack from Hezbollah when they go into Rafah. So they're not withdrawing. It's not over like some of these media places are trying to make it seem. They're just getting ready to go into the next stage of this, which may escalate things further. And so here's where we start getting into speculation stuff. So just speculation. I don't like to do speculation, but this is one of those times where I think it's appropriate. This, again, could lead to escalation in the area. If they do this, it's going to anger a lot of people, and a lot of the people that they're going to anger align with countries listed for the Psalm 83. I don't want to say, prophecy type of thing, because, again, we don't exactly know if it's already happened or if it's a future event. Things seem to be lining up in the way that it could be a future thing. I've had the opinion, and I still do, that I don't know. I don't have an opinion on if it's past or present, or past or future, but it seems to be lining up in a way that it could be. And the biggest key to me was Egypt. Egypt is getting ticked off with Israel, which that's something that I did not think we'd see, because they are such a huge trade partner with Israel. They haven't had like the greatest relationship, but they've always had a well-working relationship, and that seems to be deteriorating very fast. And so that's a big sign that Psalm 83 could be in play if it is a future thing. I'm not going to sit here and say that it is or not. I'm still in the camp of I'm waiting and seeing. But it seems to be looking that way. And that also does fit for the future event, which I believe happens post-rapture in the day of the Lord, of Ezekiel 38, where Israel is going to be sitting there in tranquility, unwalled, in peace. And then all of a sudden, because if you wipe out all the enemies around Israel, then they can do that. Then the other one that adds to it, if Hezbollah does get involved with this, you've got a direct line straight into Damascus for Isaiah 17 to take place, to make the city uninhabitable. And so that's definitely on play here. So I wanted to make a point. Isaiah 17 is something we could see. Not saying we will, not saying we won't. Something we could. We don't know the exact timing on that. Psalm 83 is also something we could see. I'm not saying that we will or we won't. Ezekiel 38 is something that is going to happen after the rapture, because that's when, I always say, God's going to go Old Testament again, and he's going to show the world who he is, like he did back in the Old Testament. And we know that because God's going to protect Israel in a very supernatural way. And so, yeah, that's what we got going on with that. Another thing to make note of on this is it says Rafah date has been set to attack Rafah despite objections from the United States of an attack on that location. We've been seeing for a while now, but we're progressively seeing the United States back further and further and further and further away from Israel. Now, the Pentagon did put in their meeting, was it today or yesterday? I can't remember. I think it was today, where they said that there was no genocide in Gaza. So they still have somewhat of a show going on, a display that they're still behind Israel. But we've seen for years, that the U.S. has been slowly backing away from Israel. And so that's another thing to watch for in that as well. And then let's get into the Turkey thing real quick, because this is also as important, in my opinion. Turkey imposes export restrictions on Israel until Gaza ceasefire. Coming from Ankara, this is Reuters. Turkey restricted exports of a wide range of products to Israel on Tuesday until a ceasefire is declared in Gaza, in Ankara's first significant measure against Israel after 6 months of war. We understand that when this thing first began, the first thing Turkey did was restrict all materials that could be used for weapons. So that's been in effect. This is now extending it broader, on a broad scale. Israel said it would respond to the measures, which include curbs on exports of steel, fertilizer, jet fuel, with its own restrictions on products from Turkey. Turkey has denounced Israel for its campaign in Gaza, which was launched following Palestinian militant group Hamas. That was October 2nd or 7th. Come on. I can read. I know I can read. I was just complaining about how they're dumbing people down to make it so you can't read. And here I am. I can barely read this. My goodness. Ankara has called for immediate ceasefire, supported steps to try Israel for genocide, which, again, that's not going to happen. Sent thousands of tons of aid for Gazans. It says, however, Ankara also maintained commercial ties with Israel despite a strong rhetoric prompting, a domestic backlash. The trade restrictions, which come into force on Tuesday, allow Israel's rejection of a Turkish request to take part in aid airdrop operation in Gaza. The trade ministry said that the measures would apply to the exports of products from 54 different categories, including iron, marble, steel, cement, aluminum, brick, fertilizer, construction equipment, and products, aviation fuel, and more. And then it goes down into domestic backlash, which I think this is kind of interesting. It says in recent weeks, Erdogan has faced growing criticism over his government's continuing commercial ties to Israel, prompting some anti-government protests and denting popular support. So Erdogan already doesn't like Israel, and now he's getting more pressure from people in his own country saying we need to go against Israel even more. And as we know, Turkey is part of the big three, but the main or the big five that's going to go into Israel when Ezekiel 38 happens. Russia, Iran, Turkey, Libya, and Sudan. And so increasing tension between Turkey and Israel, as well as more pressure on Erdogan to disown Israel even more. So that's important to understand. On Saturday, police in Istanbul declared dozens of protesters demanding an end to the trade with Israel. Erdogan's stance towards Israel and the conflict in Gaza was a key factor for some of his party's losses and March 31st local elections with the Islamic New Welfare Party. Wow. That is just the party that you just don't want to be a part of. Not only is it Islamist, but it's New Welfare. How much bad can we pack into a party name? Oh my goodness. Gaining support on the back of a more hardline stance on Gaza. So we got, again, not only some of those countries around Israel that are getting more and more irritated about Israel, but now we got U.S. that is still backing away slowly, but they're still backing away. And we've got Turkey that's increasing the pressure to disown Israel even more than they already have. So it's just how anybody can sit there and say the Bible is just a bunch of fairy tales. I don't know how you can sit there and say that, because it just continues to just be right and right again, and it's just continuing to show how right it is. Man, when Jesus said he is the truth, there's your proof. Again, I just don't know how you can deny that. You have to actively choose to deny this. It's incredible.